Well, it's that time again. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the interview with Craig-Veltri.
Thank you, Megan Pennington, and welcome to the interview. The revolving door policy is in effect as I gave easily the most candid interview of my life on his podcast, Recovery on the Rocks with Pat Phillips, last month at Serenity Farms in Washington, PA. We'll talk more about Serenity Farms as we go on. He has been active as a bass player in several greater Pittsburgh bands and spent the better part of the last year running for controller of Washington County, recording in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and calling in from Washington County, Pennsylvania. Here he is, Pat Phillips. Pat, welcome to the interview.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm very, very, very happy that you asked me to be on your podcast. And I know that you were on my podcast a couple of weeks
I was,
ago, which has been very, very good reviews.
thank you.
And before we go any further, I just want to thank you for being so candid and opening up, because part of what I want to do with my podcast is I want people to realize that there's always hope if you work for it. But also, if people who aren't in recovery, like myself,
Right,
I've noticed over the years that people who aren't in recovery tend to judge people in recovery in a different way.
for sure.
And I always see that, like, when, if you have a broken arm, you put a cast on it, right? And people say, oh, you've got a cast. But when something's going on between the ears, that cast, people don't want to talk about it,
Well, let's
So,
begin with how you became involved, because as has been mentioned already, you are yourself not recovery. I don't think I've even ever seen you drink, in fact. But
not very often, no.
okay, well, so what was it that drew you into wanting to help people in recovery, as some people would say in recovery circles and recovery meetings, a normie?
Well, I think, boy, this is like a spider's web, right?
Okay.
I think, from the time I was young as a teenager, and I don't know if what my personality, people always would like to reach out to me and just talk privately, say, Pat, can I talk to you? And I started seeing things a little bit differently and started looking at the root of a lot of the issues that I see in this world are anxiety triggers.
Mhm.
And I see that anxiety grow deeper and deeper, and then people start to get lost in that. And I believe that sometimes substances are what they think are helping them get out of that, when really it just seems to exacerbate it, right?
Yeah, and you were getting, seems like that's what you were trying to get at with a lot of your line of questioning, and what a lot of people in recovery don't notice when they first start doing that, and or don't expect anyways, is that rebound effect that happens, because that's what really the addiction tends to draw people down upon, because you're going to need more, because the
Yeah.
anxiety is bouncing back a whole lot harder. So do you personally deal with anxiety issues yourself, if you don't mind my asking?
It's funny you said that, because a lot of things have gone on in my life recently. The election from last year was crazy, and then my mother, who had been sick for a while, like this year, she really went down. A very, very painful 5 months, 6 months,
Mhm.
and she eventually passed away about a
Yeah.
month ago. And so I felt a little bit of that anxiety creeping back in, like it did years and years and years ago. The way that I dealt with it in the past was I just learned to pull me outside of me and look down upon the world objectively. Like, how am I going through the world? And the world has changed a lot in those 30 some years, but I find myself doing that again, just because there's just so much going on. That's how I kind of cope with anxiety, and I try to be as real as possible between my own ears, without collapsing upon, oh my God, right?
Yeah. It
And when
does
I noticed that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
it does sound like a lot of techniques that I've found in a lot of recovery meetings, and stuff that I do for sure. It sounds a lot like the old saying, you shouldn't be upstairs without supervision
Yeah.
when it comes to your own mind. I've heard semblances of that before. And yet you find that the channels that you're working right now, especially Serenity Farms in particular, you find yourself volunteering your time, I presume, is
Yeah.
what the capacity you're in with them. How did you it seems like they started up within a recent year. For those that don't know what Serenity Farms is, it's a substance abuse outreach program in Washington County. They work out of the refurbished Greyhound station that used to
Yeah.
be in
Yes.
Washington County. Hence the bus logos on a lot of the
Yep.
we threw the logo up there at the beginning of the program. That's the Serenity bus. So we so being a Washington Jefferson grad, being a native Washingtonian, if you will, is was it proximity? Was it just the way that you thought best to help? How did you get involved specifically with
It
Serenity
was
Farms?
it was it was several things coming together. Some people that I know were actually, and you met Matt.
Yeah.
He's the curator, the president, if you will, of the facility. Um, his family, his father was a kind of a Washington County legend. He had started a Serenity Farms 40, 50 years ago, the original Serenity Farms, which was near Hickory, PA, on an old piece of farm land. And I know several people who went through there very successfully. So as his dad got older, and things slowed down, Matt wanted to relight the torch, if you will, and it's really a unique facility. I think that's the other thing that had drawn me in, because I've known Matt for a lot of years. I think he's a great guy. He's got a lot of good people like Christy and Julio, and I don't think you met Julio, but you need to meet Julio. He's
Hmm. I've
been through
seen
a
him on
lot,
some of the branding, but no, I didn't have the pleasure.
and he's just, his approach to things is so fantastic. And the fact that they have a halfway and a three-quarter way facility, so it's becoming a very full circle facility. And so knowing Matt and seeing what was going on and talking about the things where I would see people when I was younger starting to go through things, and over time being in the work world, you could always tell when the people were struggling with some form of addiction. It could be serious, it could be minor. And I always kind of felt for that, because, once again, being inside your own head is a very, very hard place to be, because you start to think, oh my God, I'm the only one. I'm the only one. And
Mm,
there's really a lot of people out there. And if you could help a little bit, that's actually a lot. And I also believe where I think people in addiction, you don't want to replace one addiction from another addiction. So a lot of people get into the 12-step programs, which are phenomenal, but
mhm.
I fear sometimes that don't get addicted to this, even though, because it's just another addiction. So I really believe that if you can give people, that much confidence, right? It's like planting a seed. You put it into the
Absolutely.
right soil, you put the right water on it, and that confidence grows. You give someone who's basically been just torturing themselves, right? And crawling within their own skin, they have no confidence. But you give
Mhm.
them a little bit of confidence, and that could just be from talking. That could be, and this through music. Music has, I believe, healing power. And that confidence, you watch it grow. It's something. We have a mutual friend who's been on my podcast, Amy Jane. Girl's been through
She's been
everything.
on this podcast a bunch.
Yeah, and she's on tour now. They're starting this week. They're opening for Leonard Skinner.
Oh yeah.
They're playing with Foreigner. And this
Mm.
is going to take the majority of the rest of the summer. And the girls, I mean, it took a while, but she's really found herself. You're an example of
I,
that, right?
I
And what
well,
I notice in both of you is that from when and I met you through my friend Stacy, right when you were starting to,
yeah.
get into the sobriety. I've seen your confidence grow. I've seen Amy's confidence grow. So that's why I really believe deep inside that a little bit of confidence and
Well,
it grows. And
well, two things that you would set out of all of that. The when it comes to I'm the only one, it's a matter of I'm the only one that I know, and it's a great idea. It's really, if you have a strength for networking, it's really that aspect of recovery. 12 steps you mentioned, that's certainly a way of how those organizations tend to work. And as and I'll follow up on the music side of things in a moment, but
yeah,
I, nobody. I mean, there's a reason why it's not a self-help program. It's a help program, that everything. Because
Yes.
anything that I learned, Amy learned, even our friend Stacy, up to when unfortunately she
Yeah.
passed away last year. But even up to her in her story, she got help too. So all you got to do first is ask. We're here with Pat Phillips on the Craig-Veltri interview, proud member of the Scarfire Media Podcast Network. For more on Scarfire Media, please visit our website, scarfiremedia.com. Cool Brother Podcast on the Scarfire Media Podcast Network. The Mothership Fire Pit is up and running. Check out my interview with Megan Pennington. This, I think, is the 1700th, I think we've heard already with me and her at this point, and
Wow.
happy to do it every time. And thank you for listening to the Craig-Veltri interview. Please like, share, and subscribe. So you're a bass player. How did that begin in your life?
Oh, this is one of those funny stories. And years ago, I told this story on a radio station. So when I was 15, my younger brother had started playing guitar. My younger brother, to this day, is a brilliant guitarist. His name's my brother, Jeff Phillips. And he was getting really good quick. And I was thinking, well, I'll be the singer, right? So this is the early 80s. I'm a teenager. But I realized that I didn't have that super high voice. I'm a kind of a crooner. I love to sing, but
I can hear it.
Dean, yeah,
I never
Dean
heard you
Martin
sing,
wasn't going to Dean Martin wasn't going to cut it when Quiet Riot was big, right? So I had a doctor's appointment when I was
Look
in
what
ninth
happened with
grade.
my Iron Maiden as an example.
And so I had a doctor's appointment one day when I was in like ninth grade, and I was going to buy a water bed. I had some cash, and I
My
walked to the
Uncle
music
Phil
store and
had
bought a
one,
bass.
so
I bought a
Good, good.
bass instead of the water bed.
Smart
And
investment.
if I had to say, if you think when you look retrospect in life, it's probably the greatest purchase I've ever made in my life, because of that moment. I have two brothers, and I'm tremendously close with both my brothers. I'm blessed for that. But the relationship I developed with my younger brother musically, and then even outward after that, I mean, we've met people from all over the world. My brother and his networking, like Phil X, who's the guitar player for Bon Jovi.
Yeah, I know
And
of him. Yeah.
so like people like that, my brother's so funny that, the way he meets people. I'll have to tell that story offline before I tell it online, but it's hysterically funny.
Well,
So little things like that, the people I've met just from the Pittsburgh music scene, let alone from around the world, to where, I've had endorsements with amplifier companies, and, a relationship with, my 5-string basses are Sadowski basses, and Roger Sadowski, who builds those basses, is the most incredible human being. That relationship I've had with him for 26, 27 years, little things like that. I've just met so many good people. And the reason we're having this interview right now is because I got involved with music a million years ago.
oh yeah.
Things like that.
There's an old photograph of Johnny Cash talking to Joe Strummer and Henry Rollins. People say, how are these three guys chatting with each other? I'm like, dude, that's Tuesday in Nashville.
100%. But you touch on something really, really important there, because, I always say this is that, we can categorize music from classical to jazz to
I
country.
can't stand the purity tests, personally.
But I love music across the board. Listen, I love Miles Davis as much as I love Johnny Cash. There's something about, and I wrote a newspaper article where I concluded the article where, hey, if I'm playing a B minor chord, that B minor chord doesn't care what type of music it is. It's B minor.
Exactly.
And
so
I'm sorry, go ahead.
With that vast appreciation, I assume that you've played in all sorts of different bands. For anybody not familiar with your resume, who would you say are like the biggest ones that you played
Well,
with?
I think a couple of things that I'm kind of proud of over the years is that I've been able to kind of be enigmatic as a bassist, because people will call me, Pat, can you play Friday? And that's always been the most fun to me, is that challenge. I just played this past weekend at the Pittsburgh Music Festival, which was at the Iron City Brewing facility up in Creighton, PA. And my God, was it laid out well. They had 2 big stages set up. A lot of the well-known Pittsburgh acts over the years, from Norman Nardini and a lot of those guys. Funny as hell, by the way. And
He's a trip.
but I had a chance to play with Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors.
Yeah.
Um, very much, they kind of have an element. We're talking about different types, a little bit of a world beat, a little bit of rock, little certain kind of aspects of some soul type music, some jamism in it, and I didn't have a long time to learn the material. And this was all original material. And I'm like, good Lord, I don't want to piss anyone off. But, but it turned out I had so much fun in the 95-degree heat playing with guys I've never played with before, and really super talented guys. And man, I'm glad I was able to do it. But just like that, a country act will call me. I played in a band called Rough Creek for 6 years,
Oh, I've heard
which
of
was
Rough Creek,
which
yeah.
is one of the more well-known country bands. And once again, I don't care if it's country. I don't care if it's rock. I mean, in my heart, early 70s soul music as a basis seems to resonate most with me, but I don't really care. I want to make music with
that
other
type of
people who
music,
love.
when you really think about it, it was built around the bass line. That anything Motown, anything Stax.
Yeah.
I mean, and the song's built on the rhythm section anyway, so it's just the nice little bit of seasoning. What initially drew you to the bass? Just the potential therein.
I think so, because when I was a small child, music fascinated me, but I didn't know why. My dad had this gigantic Motorola console stereo with 15-inch speakers on each side and these radio horns built into this oak, and he had this great collection of like the Righteous Brothers, the trumpeter Al Hurt. And I didn't know who they were, but my God, I thought it was pretty amazing. Where my mother liked more of the pop stuff, a little bit of the old doo-wop. So this was always churning in me. And then my younger brother can attest to this. In like 1977, I'm like 8 or 9 years old. And Cheap Trick Live at Budokan came out.
I have that record. Great record.
And for some reason, we thought we were Cheap Trick. And we would hang a rope with the thing acting like it was a microphone, and just sing "I Want You to Want Me" live. And something really clicked at that point. And then other things, around that time, it's not that I love disco music, but the backbeat of disco music really kind of registered with me. And then some of the rock, and then the early 80s stuff, like with the Clash. I go way back to Led Zeppelin. That's always churned in me. But I think the most important thing is when you take that and you start to become yourself, when you want to start to mix with other people, you want to mix with the right people. Mm-hmm. You want people who have pretty good souled people, right? Mm-hmm. That way, when you make music, it's not about your ego, their ego. And I don't want to play whack-a-mole with egos.
Oh, no.
It's I just want someone that, hey, let's groove.
I haven't been long in many bands that people butt heads on. I don't understand how people who are, I mean, I guess the common ambition, they were nice at first, like any abusive relationship tends to be. But I usually, if there tends to be an element that, you can be fun, but I can see the end to it. And above all, don't be boring at the very
no. Because when you're making live music, you want to be expressive, because you want what you're doing. You want the people in the front row to the 50th row to feel what you're doing. You want to resonate with them.
Absolutely. Pat Phillips here on the Craig Veltri interview, now streaming on musicfromthe412.com. New episodes of the Craig Veltri interview drop every Monday at 8 a.m. and are streaming periodically and in full stream on musicfromthe412.com. Also, any people with new music to play on the Craig Veltri interview, all of their music will be submitted for rotation on Music from the 412. Get at me at craig-veltri-official@gmail.com to submit to be interviewed on the Craig Veltri interview on Music from the 412. I assume that you have been in Washington County all of your life. You're native, and
for the most part, yeah.
Okay. Went even so far as going to college at Washington Jefferson, yep. In Washington, PA. What is it about Washington County specifically that keeps you around?
I think it's a lot like when you think of Pittsburgh, that, Pittsburgh was always a melting pot. And I've in some ways have been blessed from, be it work, be it music, to travel everywhere. I've been in other cities. I'm kind of a foodie, so I go to the cities, and then when you become a foodie and you get involved with the local music scene in other cities, you start to learn a lot about cities. Like I'm fascinated with New Orleans, right?
How
But the
many
one
times have
thing,
you been?
the New Orleans, I would say I've been to New Orleans probably close to 10 times over the
Yeah.
years.
I went for the first
And
time 2 years ago for the Biloxi video. It is amazing down
if you
there.
like to eat, it's the place to go.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the
Oh
scat
boy, we ate.
and the musicianship is it's so unique, because a lot of people who've never been there think of New Orleans as being, oh, that's in the South. Oh no. New Orleans is its own entity.
It's
It's
practically on an island.
yeah, and at certain times of the year it is.
Hmm. Hmm. I
But the
will.
culture, the food, wow.
I've told this story many times on the podcast. My grandfather was actually a jazz bass player. Never knew the man. He died before I was born, but he managed to he served in World War II, went to college and at Georgetown on the GI Bill, and paid his way through college playing in jazz bands as a bass player. Met a lot of people. In fact, there is actually some real footage somewhere in the family of him in New Orleans, probably on Bourbon Street, having a lovely conversation with his old buddy Dizzy Gillespie.
Oh my God.
So there's that was a family vacation for many years in my family. But back to Washington County, and what
Yeah.
keeps it around, even though you've been to great places like New
What
Orleans.
I like, obviously you make from the time you're young, you make connections, you network. The strange thing for me is because I'm more from like the Cannonsburg area, which is just north of Washington.
Mhm.
I had been away from with work, been away with music, so many years that it became almost like I wasn't there. And then 4 or 5 years ago, I started to come around to my own area more and start to reintroduce myself and realize that, yeah, there's a whole lot of that little town kind of stuff.
Played
But
there
at the
many
same,
times. That's right.
yes, but that's everywhere.
Mhm.
And that I still like the togetherness, and the element of pride that people from, Cannonsburg and Washington have. So it was nice to get back to that a little bit. And coming around working through doing things with Serenity Farms, it's still part of the community. And a lot of people will just want to run away. Where you're from is kind of important.
Hmm.
You
That's
know,
why I go
there,
back.
and there's an element of that. No matter, but you could think of that in many levels because where were your grandparents from? They weren't from here. Yeah, they came here, but that's where I'm from. Um, but there's still something important about going to the local restaurant, telling those people hello, talking about the food with them, seeing some of your old music friends and reacquainting with them just to see what they're into now. I will sit down, I will put on a 4-string bass, a 5-string bass, a fretless bass, an upright bass, and I will come make music with you. That's just because there's something special about that. And I think you could say that about a hometown as well. You could say that about your circle of musicians, even as it expands out. It's a lot like, well, that's my town, you know. And then what I also like about that is you get a little bit farther to the right or to the left or upward or downward, you get you start to see things that other people do that you don't do, and you're like, wait a minute, that's kind of good. And not being judgmental about it, because a lot of people are like, oh, that sucks, that's garbage. And I'll use a perfect example. Another article that I wrote one time was the article was entitled "Just What in the Hell is Real Country Music?" So many people say, "Oh, that's not real country music. That stinks. That sucks," And I'm like, hey, think about, Chris Christopherson and Waylon Jennings. That's real country music. Well, if you go back to the late 60s when they had long, greasy hair and were playing electric guitars, they were hated by the establishment.
Oh
And
yeah, do you
now
really think
that's
Buck Owens
real.
was so beloved? I mean, he eventually did a TV show for 20 years or so out of Nashville, but but eventually when they were coming out with the Bakersfield Sound, it was a rebellious thing. And but nowadays
100%.
everybody's talking about, no, that was real country music. Folks, I've said it before. If you really want to take this purity test all the way, get some Carter family records and some Jimmy Rogers records, maybe some Roy Acuff for some good measure, go into your hole and shut the hell up.
But you know what? It goes, and it actually goes beyond, even outside of country music. I've studied, and like I said, I'm a geek this way, Western music back 1,000 years, right? And just because, and I want to see how the spider web grew, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to see, oh, I get this because, a lot of people, and this is jazz, this is country, this is rock, this is soul, the drum set, right? There was no such thing as a drum set until probably around World War I, because people were starting to do different things where Dixieland, so-called Dixieland jazz.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? This marching bass drum, if I put it on the ground and I put my snare next to it, oh, now we have a drum kit. If that didn't happen, we have none of this music.
Exactly. And and you obviously have maintained a lot of studying on a lot of different things, but I believe your strength is and your occupation has been in finance. Am I
Yes.
understanding that correctly? All right. And you, with all of your willingness and wanting to be in the community, it's not surprising to me in retrospect that you wanted to throw your hat into the political ring in local politics as a controller. For anybody that might have fallen asleep in civics class, and there might be a lot of people on this line that don't vote, what does a controller do?
Well,
What you have done?
Well, what I have done, my experience comes from the banking world, where I worked a lot with banking systems, systems conversions, product management. Part of that process is auditing, which is part of a controllership of a county. The other part is primarily paying bills. So a lot of people don't realize that a controller and a treasurer are the two financial positions in county government.
Right.
Controller pays the bills and audits the row offices. Treasurer takes in the money. Now, that I ended up losing in November, very, very close race, but it was an interesting, what I really learned is the dirt of politics, to where the qualifications, people don't really care. We've become so divided politically that they're just voting for parties. They don't really care if tax dollars are being wasted. It's just, I'm voting for that party. And politically, I'm very, very, I'm a centrist, because I think when you get too far to each side, I think you lose the vision of reality. And if you sit down and look at the political spectrum, say post-industrial revolution, now you could say right wing back then was more imperialism, to where now it's more the conservatism of governments. Where the farther right you go, you have dead center, which would be moderate. The farther right you go, you become more conservative. From conservatism goes into nationalism, from nationalism into fascism.
Fascism, yeah.
Yeah. When you go left, you become more the Democratic side. You head into, from the Democrat, you go to more socialism, eventually into communism. And what people fail to realize is you don't want to go to the extreme of either one, because you're no longer free.
Exactly.
Because you are now communist or fascist, and your government owns you. And that's kind of scary.
It is kind of scary, and we usually don't dive into the minutia of the political spectrum here, but I will just ask, as far as what you were having seen that dirt, having seen that what it takes to run a campaign as like that, would you consider running again?
It would have to be the perfect scenario, because I really put a lot of time, effort,
you
and
hang
money
around
into
recovery circles all the time. Perfection is not a healthy goal.
Very true. But it was, but like I said, it was a learning experience, and I realized how far and how dirty people will go just to get their platform across. And that part I don't like, because I ran a very, very clean campaign, and I refused to, and I was given so much dirt and information that I refused to use. That's just not what I do.
Well, grateful that your better angel spoke to you when it could have been very easy to make that Faustian bargain. Pat Phillips here on the Craig-Veltri interview, now on Patreon. If you want to catch the full CVI archive. As of this episode, we will have up over 60 episodes available for download and listen, just $5 a month. And you can listen to past interviews with folks like Jack Gavin of the Charlie Daniels Band, Chris Lee of WRAL TV in Raleigh, and adult film star Maya Blair, all on the CVI archive, the Craig Veltri Interviews Complete archive on patreon.com at patreon.com/CVI archive. So we've talked about maybe as running back again in the political realm at some point. What do you see your position in? I'm sure you're going to be doing music until you can't do music anymore.
Right.
But Serenity Farms career, what are we looking at? What are you looking at for the next end of the decade?
I just want, as crazy as this may sound, I want to leave a positive footprint on no matter what I do, be it music, be it working with Serenity Farms, be it career. I don't want to leave anything negative behind me. And I'd like to be able to, there's you can call it a meme of basically an enhanced stick person with a bunch of other stick people around. And the one stick person is turned yellow from light. And as that person walks in the room, the other stick people become enlightened, or that light is shining with them. And I think that's kind of how I want my life to be. I want to be a positive, even if it's not an influence. I don't want to be that pompous jerk. I want to come in. I want to have my ears wide open, my eyes wide open, and being able to talk to people, but on an even level. I don't want to over talk people. But my ears will always be there especially for my friends. And I think that everyone should just go in life with that even keel, learn how to breathe. You think breathing is simple, but some people, man, it's a hard thing to do. And I think
just you saying that, noticing, I begin to notice my breath, and all of a sudden it's starting to get heavy. It's an odd trick of the mind.
But if you think about something, if something heavy is occurring, you could just go, everything's going a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
But that one breath, man, can just really change everything. Because you stop for 1 second, because think back maybe when you were younger, where you just reacted and maybe made an asshole out of yourself, right?
Let's just
say. But if you take that one, because, especially when you're dealing with someone who's very narcissistic, they want you to do that. That validates them, right? But if you don't react to a narcissist and you're like, okay, they just implode. And that's, plus it's a good way to keep your blood pressure down.
Not to mention, I've said, many times, or I've heard it said many times, the first thought is always the worst thought. So
because it's reactionary,
exactly.
And I think as Americans, we are just naturally reactionary, where we should be more, not reactive. We should be more pro, we should. Yeah, we should definitely.
I'd like to think I'm more well-traveled than the average American, but I think having met many people of different nationalities, that's human nature, man. I wouldn't bet Americans on that.
But, I think in America we look at it a little bit differently, because we're very proud too, right? And I think that
have you watched World Cup coverage this year?
Yes, but I think what I mean by that is, especially even if you get biblical. They'll talk about pride and ego, not necessarily being a good thing, but when you take pride, like I gave a eulogy for my great uncle many years ago, and I talked about pride, and I think that the clergyman there was looking at me like, oh no, and I talked about his pride for his family and his pride for his grandchildren was a really tremendously positive thing, to where you can't just label pride and ego is something that's always bad, especially when it's doing something positive. And like I said, there's a lot of negative out there, and you do a little bit of positive, you're making the world stronger. You're making the world better, even if it's 1 second at a time. And I know maybe I sound like the cliche, but I believe in that. Life is too short to be negative.
cliches are something that you should avoid when doing a literary exercise, writing a poem, making some kind
Yeah.
of art. But those cliches do speak to a universal truth. So I say maybe not write the cliche, but be the cliche sometimes if it's positive, for sure.
And they were said, those cliches were said for a reason. You know,
Exactly. Uh, but
that's just, but in a nutshell, man, I just think being more positive in life, and it's not always easy to do because not every day and every moment's perfect,
no,
but
heavens no.
working on it. Hey, look at our Pittsburgh Pirates, right?
Yeah.
That's an exercise
The
in something,
bullpen could
right?
be better, but heaven's sake, we have one of the best lineups we've seen in decades at this point, probably since the 40s, if the numbers are
The
correct.
best in baseball this year.
Yes. So, at least we know the choke point at this point, and that's a lot of where it is to start. Well, Pat, speaking of cliches, here comes a thing that most interview shows. Here comes the gimmick portion of it. A nice way of closing. It's
Okay.
called the No Kin Questionnaire. A couple of rapid fire questions. First thing that comes to your mind whenever you're ready. Off we go.
Okay.
Childhood celebrity crush.
Woo! Any three of the Charlie's Angels.
See, I've
Of the three.
Farrah Fawcett has often been the popular one of men of a certain age, and but the other two, what were you just a fan of the show? Were you a fan of the ladies? What
No,
was it about them?
when I think when that show came on, I was probably 8 or 9, and that was the first time I realized there's something about women that wow. And listen, and Kate Jackson and Jacqueline Smith, Cheryl Ladd, they were all right in that. Yeah, they're my first crushes.
I took a notice, I for whatever reason, TV Land and all the old syndicated stuff. But Kate Jackson, I didn't notice her on Charlie's Angels first. I noticed her in reruns on Scarecrow and Mrs. King.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
So, she probably would have been my favorite. So out of those three, would you say that was kind of the template for the women you would eventually date in your life and potentially marry?
Women I've dated over the years, there was no one particular look. I always liked to meet a woman, talk to a woman, and get to laughing with a woman, right? I think that's where the biggest connection with me would always start. And through my relationships, the girls that I've dated for a long period of time, that was always the biggest part of it, being able to laugh and even laugh at ourselves.
Yes,
because I will pick on me before I pick on anyone else.
Begging is my love language. I've had to warn people, and further, yeah, I'll say this: women can be an absolute bombshell of a 10. If your sense of humor is a 2, you're gone.
You're done.
Again, don't be boring. Moving on with the questionnaire. What was your favorite subject in school?
Wow, there are several because I'm still a history nerd. I'm a bit of a science nerd, so I like to read the nighttime sky. But I really I gravitate to
everything.
Don't have a telescope anymore, but I will break out the binoculars to look at the moons of Jupiter.
Oh wow!
So we can go on another 3 or 4 hours with that. But what I like about the history side of things is now I realize that history has been bastardized. We think of Paul Revere running around, the British are coming, but meanwhile, that's really not the case. We base everything off the poem written by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow.
Here's another name, Israel Bissell. So yeah, he was the one that made the ride. I mean, really.
But the verbiage, the British are coming, wasn't even really used. They were knocking on doors. And if you dig down to the history and that's fascinating to me, but I look as all of this history for the past, say, since we've been walking upright, 300,000, 500,000 years, everything that's happened is why we are what we are right now. So that's just naturally fascinating to me.
Yes.
And so the history part of it, the science part of it, obviously, music and the physics of music, that stuff, those things.
You're the kind of guy. You're like me. It seems. I do not mind knowing how the sausage is made. So
I just 100%, and I sometimes make that too with my other brother. So.
Oh wow. Well, you seem to have done a lot in your life, but what occupation other than your own would you like to attempt?
I you know, I just this flash just hit my head from History of the World Part Two when Mel Brooks said he was a stand-up philosopher,
Yeah.
and B. Arthur said, "Oh, you're a bullshit artist." So I like waxing philosophic. I like to be, if I could just sit and have good conversation with people about real topics and incorporating the history into that.
Is that a lot of the reason why you are doing recovery on the rocks?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, like just talking to you, we've known each other for a few years, but I didn't know you to that level. So we got to break down barriers, learn other things about, just like we're talking right now.
Oh yeah.
And I always tell people I'm talking with my hands, so I'm fascinated. Um, so those things are important. Life is much more than the surface. Sometimes you give it a little scratch, see what's below the surface. And I think the podcast allows that, but it's twofold, because it's me and it's Chris, sometimes sitting there interviewing and talking to people, but we're also opening a door to other people to get to know that, hey, you're not alone in what you're going through. And if that is helping, I'm all for that. But it also lets me, because I'm so fascinated by what makes people tick, that, it's kind of gratifying to me as well. I don't mean that in a selfish way.
Oh, not at all. First of all, I think everybody, not to sound cynical, but more in to say that it's impossible for anybody to go into anything without any self-interest. In recovery, I've come to understand that as selfless selfishness. Sure, you want to help others, but if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. And even by being present, you're still getting something out of it, whether you intended to or not.
And what you just said is absolutely true. And to put a cherry on that, you quoted Geddy Lee, or Neil Peart, which there's one of my all-time influences. So
I'm more of an 80s Rush kind of guy, but like you say with Miles Davis, I can appreciate some of their broader pieces. It's just not something I can use, and it's not something that I'm more ready to quote.
And I'll use this as one example, because I was trying to think of a way to, where you take bits and pieces, and this could be with life, this could be with music. Look at what Miles Davis did. There was bop jazz in the early 50s, and it's everybody just just all at the same time. Where that wasn't Miles' thing, because he was playing with Coltrane, he was playing, and he's like, I got to do something. So he incorporated blues with jazz, and all of a sudden it became called the cool jazz, right?
Mm-hmm.
The masses loved it. And that blues, and if you saw, got incorporated to form rock and roll, to form soul and Motown. Blues is it. So that's how life works. So it's like, it's creating a great dish. What are the ingredients to make this dish great? And what are the ingredients to make this dish? You know what? I'm going to have a party with 50 people. I want all 50 people to like this.
Yes.
So, but all different people, So things like that. And I know I can go off on tangents all day long.
Of course. Well, I mean, hey, I remember watching Wynton Marsalis describe jazz as a gumbo. It's like you take this little element of it away, you have a nice stew. You don't quite have gumbo. So it's and you got
to get that roux.
Exactly. Again, grandson of a jazz player, I can appreciate I have great appreciation for all of that, but I'm also very aware of a lot of my limitations as a musician, as an artist. So I stick to what I know and appreciate what other people can do. Like what you like, do what you do, keep spreading that love. On the other side of the coin, Pat, I don't care how many bags of money have been handed to you. What job under no circumstances would you ever want to attempt?
Wow. Anything that would involve being spiteful. I don't think I would want to.
As you said earlier, why you didn't win your political race.
You know what? Yes. Because the one, and maybe this is just part of being a bassist at heart, is that I'm a team player. The team comes first. My individual means nothing, because my individual piece is a collaborative effort in making the song work. And I think that's how life should be, right? I'm a bass geek. I've got a bunch of guitars, and I always think of whoever I'm going to play with. Oh, that could use a Fender, that could use a Gibson, that could use my Music Man, that could use a 5-string, that could use my Sadowski, my upright. I always think like that because it's not an individual effort. It's what's going to make that etouffee, what's going to make that stew, what's going to make it have the most pop for everyone.
Right. Yeah. Well, we've talked about the etouffee and a lot of other great food already on this podcast. What is your go-to food on a road trip?
Oh boy. On a road trip, I like things that are quick. So if it's something I'm going to take with me, I love like fresh greens, fresh fruits and vegetables. So I will snack on things like that for a multitude of reasons. If I've got time to cook, that's a different animal because it all depends on what friends I'm cooking for, because I'll do anything from eight cheese stuffed shells, always make my own homemade marinara, meatballs, but I always keep it as healthy as I possibly can. Even when I make my meatballs, the fat sources, I don't want them to be overly fatty. I don't want them, but I take a lot of time
for a road trip.
Very messy for a road trip. But when you got them, when they're cool, you can actually eat those at room temperature.
That's true. You can eat a lot of things at room temperature. Hey, cold pizza for musicians. That's kind of like the breakfast.
That was the staple. So the next morning, like when you get it, when you get that pizza, and then you're like, oh, I'm exhausted, and you get in at 4:30 in the morning, you wake up the next morning, cold pizza. Beautiful thing.
Well, perhaps we figured out a couple of ideas for the following hypothetical, what would be served. But if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
There could be a lot of people here. I think because ever since I took a tour of the book repository in Dallas, I've become more interested in the life of John Kennedy. Just because there's a diversity and depth to his personality from his days in the Navy up until his assassination. Someone like him, I would have loved to have had dinner with Miles Davis would have been incredible. Some of my musical idols, like John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin, just because a lot of people don't think of him because he's a bassist, but my God, the gravitas of his bass playing was
wow. And keyboard player as well.
Keyboard playing. I think I would like to go back and talk to Socrates and maybe get like what was 3,000 years ago, thinking on that level, because there are certain things that probably transcend time, and it's not so much it's because these people were saying things before we have the technology that we have today. So that kind of maybe George Patton too, because I want to see if he was as intense as he really was.
If George C. Scott did him any justice whatsoever. So
100% true. Yeah.
Right. Well, Pat Phillips, what is your biggest pet peeve?
This is another thing that's going to sound cliche. I hate weak personalities. Like by weak personality, I mean someone who has to lie and someone that's always passive aggressive. Because when you're always passive aggressive, once again you're a bullshit artist. And I just and usually I could see it from a mile away. If you can't be honest, don't say it. Don't even talk. If you can't be upfront and honest, say nothing. Don't come up with something that's not true or a half truth, because you're just wasting time.
Yeah, one thing I have learned through my recovery, not to be repetitive on that point, but we as human beings tend to come from a lot of the way we react. At least I know in my experience, we tend to react in fear. And I think that passive aggressiveness is really just the way of, you don't know what you want. You don't know how to say it. You don't know how to cope with the world around you. So you hide yourself behind that kind of.
You put a bow on this whole thing by saying that, because I was talking about, I think anxiety is the root of all evil, and the anxiety is kind of the root of that, and once again, learning how to breathe,
Exactly.
But yes, I just, to me, there's just, because I found the problem with lying is this. once you tell one lie, you have to start to tell another lie to cover that lie. And then you have to
eventually
tell
you're
three
living
more
life.
lies. Yeah.
Mm.
And it just never, it's a never ending circle of crap.
It and the truth does truly, if pardon this cliche, but it does set you free for sure. Last question.
It's ripping a scab off sometimes too, but that's okay.
Mhm. Like Seinfeld. Run off!
Yeah.
Last question of the questionnaire, Pat. What is the best advice that anyone has ever given you?
Oh man. B.E. Taylor. Do you remember the name B.E. Taylor?
I don't think so.
So the B.E. Taylor group was, Rick Wachowski, B.E. Taylor, Joe Macri were a huge band in Pittsburgh. This is when I was really, really young. And they had a song called Vitamin L. They had Love Won the Fight. And B.E. Taylor could knock down a wall with his voice. And when I was like 14 or 15, my neighbor at the time was their lighting director. And I used to go to gigs with him sometime. And my older brother would do security for them. And I was just starting to play bass, and my neighbor at the time told BE that I just started playing music, and BE came up to me, and BE Taylor was the sweetest human being. And go back and listen to his BE Taylor for years until he passed away. It's been several years now. Had a Christmas show that he toured around Pittsburgh to Indianapolis to Detroit to the Northeast. It was legendary. The Granati brothers played with him. Jeff Jimerson played with him. I mean, just the who's who of Pittsburgh musicians. And this sticks with me till this day. He came up to me and said, "I heard you're playing music." He goes, "And that's amazing." And I was like, "Wow, cool." I really didn't know him. But he said to me, "Always remember this. The music will never let you down. People will let you down. But the music itself will never let you down." And that has stayed with me for 43 years.
I think I said this on your podcast that anytime I put into my recovery, I've gotten something out of it. Anytime I put into my music before I got sober, I always got something out of it. May have not been financial gain, but did the world make a lot more sense after I wrote about it or played or
that says a lot about having peace of mind, doesn't it?
Little by little and one day at a time. Well, there's one last bit of business we got to take care of here, Pat. This should be your favorite part of the show. It is time for shameless self-promotion. Recovery on the Rocks is live and episodes streaming regularly. Where and when can we find it? Fire away.
Well, the way that Recovery on the Rocks works right now, it's more piecemeal. So the second part of yours is now, I believe it's out.
Oh, it's out.
And so we're working right now, and I'm looking to talk to people. Right now, it's geared towards musician going through recovery, but I want to talk to people who also, it's about the day-to-day fight. So, like I said, I want people to realize that it truly is a process,
Oh, yeah.
and having that, giving the podcast is just a vehicle from me saying, "Hey, everyone, you can do this. There are things you can do, and every day there are goals you can achieve." And that's really what I want to do with it. Then I let people perform at the end to say, "Wow, listen, you write amazing tunes. You perform extremely well. And look, how you're coming out of through your recovery, what's happening for you." I want to promote that. I want people to see positivity, to feel it, taste it, hear it. And then I'm going to bring you back too. I'm going to bring Amy back. Just like an update. Here's where we are. And there's going to be a struggle on this day or that day. And once again, it's positivity, it's self-belief. It's mainly just building that confidence from seeing people like you. So I am recruiting people right now to do more podcasts.
So where would the episodes be? YouTube, Spotify, under what name?
They're on YouTube and Spotify. You could watch them on the Serenity Farms website. Those are the three primary, right? We are at the very much at the genesis of this right now. We have 3 or 4 different types of podcasts being put out. I think they're all pretty darn interesting, with different characters and different personalities, where you didn't get to meet Christy, but a lot of times she co-hosts the show with me. Christy is brilliant. She has lived through recovery from both of her parents being addicts, and just living that experience through her childhood. She asks really, really, really deep, good questions. And I think we have counterpoint to how we talk. I talk about things I've experienced in my life, being a musician, from knowing the people that I'm talking to. And I just want to strike those points. So the people who are watching and listening, there's a benefit to it. And at the end of the day, Craig, man, I'm going to be sincere. It's what I do.
Well, the sincerity and the kindness, the warmth of the entire operation over there at Serenity Farms is apparent to anybody that walks through the doors, and should come through the speakers and through the screen on it. It was a pleasure to do your program. It was a thrill to have you on this program. You're one hell of a guy, and I
appreciate that, and I still have my grandfather in me. You saying that is the best thing anybody could say. If someone ever says, Pat, you're a good guy, I appreciate you in life, that's the best.
Well,
because it's simplicity, and B, it's what I am, man. It's what I am. And you know what, likewise to you, I appreciate you having me on here, because we got to talk about, the things that are so important. Music is it's pumping through my veins right now, right?
You and me both.
And the well-being of people, and people being able to use their brains and be themselves, and just having a grasp of what goes on, that's vital to me, to try to get that point across, because we're all humans. We're in this rat race together.
Well, it's good to know that this rat's not trying to eat my tail. So thank you for that, and thank you for joining me here
on the
today.
wheel. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining me here today on the Craig-Veltri.
You're welcome, and I appreciate it so much.
The Craig-Veltri Interview, where Craig-Veltri interviews wonderful people, is a production of Scarfire Media, the voice of the independent artist. Written and edited by Craig-Veltri. Your announcer is Megan Pennington. The opening theme, Shut Up, I Love You, written by Trenton Chandler and Craig-Veltri, performed by Craig-Veltri, produced by Jack Gavin. Inside the Cabin is available now on all streaming. Support Moonshine Vagabonds by downloading directly from Bandcamp. Time now to update the event calendar, because you must know where I am at all times. Friday, July 31st, I will be at Sea Captain's House in Myrtle Beach, weather permitting, from 5 to 8 p.m. Then Saturday, August 1st, Western PA, I'm coming back home to the Grumpy Beaver Pub in Bridgewater, Pennsylvania, from 8 to 11 p.m. Then on Sunday, August 2nd, I heard you missed us. We're back. Moonshine Vagabonds at 68 Feed Mill in New Brighton, Pennsylvania, from 3 to 5 p.m. For full dates, including Atlanta, Chicago, and Nashville, visit my website, craig-veltri.bandzoogle.com. For booking info, including full band and this podcast, email me at craig-veltri@gmail.com. You can find the interview on Facebook by searching the Craig-Veltri Interview, YouTube at Craig-Veltri Music, musicfromthe412.com, and you can find me on Instagram, or as my old roommate, D. Tommy Thomas, used to call it, Instagirl, at craig.veltri. For Pat Phillips, I'm Craig-Veltri, and this has been the Craig-Veltri Interview. With that, I'll pass. Shine on!